All right. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third and final webinar of the fall 2024 semester from grad and professional studies here at WPI with respect to pursuing a PhD while working in industry. We're very excited to have here in this webinar the Biology and Biotechnology Department, especially with us, Professor Emily Manning, who is, I believe, Associate Department Head. Is that the correct title? Or grad coordinator?
Associate Professor and Grad Coordinator.
And grad coordinator. So we're really excited to have Professor Manning here today because she has a lot of the insights and understanding and knowledge about the PhD program in BBT, and also what it takes, what are the protocols, the requirements, the entire process end to end, from the first day of stepping into the PhD program to getting your degree. And then, of course, answering a lot of questions about how to make, let's say, that PhD program work for you. Then afterwards, we'll be asking a combination of questions, both myself, because I can't possibly not stop talking, as well as with some of our guests here on the call. So we have several folks now, other people that might jump in. And ultimately, what we're hoping for is a great dynamic conversation about how to make the BBT PhD program work for you. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn this webinar over to Professor Manning. Thank you.
Great. So I'm just going to share some slides here. All right, so I'm Amity Manning. I've been a faculty member here in the Biology and Biotechnology Department at WPI for almost 10 years. And in my current role as graduate coordinator, as Alex mentioned, I'm heavily involved in everything from curriculum development for our students through mentoring our students from the day they walk in the door until they're getting ready to defend their thesis. And so today I'm going to give you an overview of what our PhD program looks like so that you have a feel for the kinds of students that are attracted to our program, how they're making progress through the program, and maybe even a little bit, if we have time, about where they go once they've gotten their doctoral degrees. And kind of sprinkled throughout, I'm going to talk about how an experiential PhD fits into this, how the pathway may be similar or different. So I want to start just by telling you a little bit about our graduate program. We are kind of a small to medium-sized program. We currently have about 20 PhD candidates in our department and a number of master's students as well. So we have 3 different graduate degrees. We have our PhD, our thesis-based master's, and a skills-based master's. So I know you're on this call here to talk about the PhD program, but I wanted to mention the diversity of degrees because these students all partake in similar coursework. So if you were to join our PhD program, you would likely have students from these different programs in your classes as well. Our graduation rate is pretty typical for a PhD in biology. So it takes about 5 to 6 years for completion, which means that we graduate 2 to 3 students every year. Our master's program is 2 years, so we get a little bit more turnover there, graduating 2 to 4 master's candidates each year. As I alluded to in the beginning, our students really have very diverse career ambitions, and this becomes relevant when I start to talk to you about the coursework that our students can partake in. So our PhD and master's degree recipients have gone on to diverse fields, including academic positions, industry positions, pharma, science policy, patent law. So there's really, students are coming to us with different goals, a PhD or a master's, different career ambition. And really our job is to make sure that the training that they're getting is customized not only to where they are when they come in, but to where they want to be when they leave. So we are a research-intensive department. We have a number of research faculty that our thesis students, both PhD students and master's students, are working with. And we're quite diverse. So we have faculty that are working in kind of general areas of cell biology and microbiology. and also faculty that are working in development and neurobiology. For experiential PhD candidates, often it makes sense to identify a research area that overlaps with the work that you're doing, and identify a faculty member who you might have collaborative or synergistic research interests in. But I just want to kind of throw this slide up here so that you get an idea of the variety of research that's happening. Hopefully see something that's exciting, and maybe you want to follow up on that a little bit more. In addition to kind of a diversity of research topics that our faculty are studying, our labs also utilize a variety of model systems. So everything from mouse and bioinformatics models looking at human genome data to plants and mosses, C. elegans, Drosophila, bacteria, and yeast. So really, the capacity of our department to really explore and leverage these different model systems can be a really good attribute to someone looking to get a variety of exposures. And hopefully will make it easy for our PhD candidates to find both a research topic and a research model that's appealing to them. I also want to point out that many of our biology and biotechnology faculty are affiliated with bioinformatics and computational biology. So this is another program here at WPI. And this is really appealing for many of our graduate students because what it means is those students are working often in collaborative and interdisciplinary projects. So you may join a biology and biotechnology thesis lab, and while they're in that lab, work alongside computer scientists or data scientists who are doing computational projects to try to address the same questions that our biology students are addressing using some of these different model systems. So what does a PhD look like? Well, for new students coming into the program, their first job is to identify a thesis lab. For our experiential PhD candidates, and for those who are full-time on campus, really the first step is to identify faculty that have shared or complementary research interests. You can start by looking at our biology and biotechnology faculty pages. And on those pages, you'll find links to individual research faculty, as well as links to their individual lab web pages. The next step is typically to email or set up Zoom conversations to talk to the faculty, learn a little bit more about the research interests that they have, and to gauge their interests and yours in terms of compatibility and research approach. Once you've identified a thesis lab, students then need to consider how to balance the research that they're going to be doing with course credits. So our PhD requires 90 credits of registered coursework and research. If you already have a prior master's degree, only 60 credits are required. Both of these approaches, so 90 credits without a master's, 60 credits with a prior master's, include 30 credits of coursework. And this coursework is a combination of required courses that all of our students will take, as well as elective courses that allow us to really customize the program, again, to where the student comes in, the background that they already have, and where they're looking to go. And so that might look something like this. So 10 of our course credits are required courses. So these include courses like our journal club that involves critical analysis of scientific literature. So teaching students to read, evaluate, and critique the literature in their field. All of our students are required to take a statistics course, applied statistics for engineers and scientists. All of our students are required to take a scientific writing and proposal development course. This course challenges students to write components of a research proposal and also to read, review, and provide critique so that they really see both sides of scientific writing and proposal development. And then all of our students are required to complete a research integrity in the sciences course. So in addition to these 10 credits of required courses, students are additionally required to select from a variety of biology and biotechnology electives. So they need to complete 14 credits of courses of their choosing that are within the biology and biotechnology department. Many of our students will select courses like molecular and cell biology, advanced genetics, or topic-specific courses like synthetic biology or cancer biology. There's many courses, and again, students are really able to choose the courses that either complement the thesis research that they're doing or expand their horizons, right? They can sample something different that maybe they haven't had a chance to experience as an undergrad or that they've not yet been exposed to in their thesis research. And then the final 6 credits of coursework comes from electives outside of biology and biotechnology. So these courses may be additional courses in math. Maybe you want to take a more advanced statistics course. Maybe you want to be exposed to computer science or bioinformatics, so you can take graduate level courses in these disciplines. Some of our students have career ambitions to teach, and so they may choose to do mentored teaching or pedagogy courses. Some of our doctoral candidates are interested in maybe running a startup. They may elect to choose business courses or patent law. So the idea for these final 6 credits is really to help you customize the program to really explore what it is you want to do post PhD. And of course, there's always some students who are very invested in the biology and biotechnology, and these additional 6 credits are simply more biology courses. So that's an option as well. So after you have identified a thesis lab, you've selected the coursework that you're going to complete, the next thing on the horizon is really thinking about our qualifying exam. So at the end of the second year, all of our PhD students are required to complete a qualifying exam. In the biology and biotechnology PhD program, our qualifying exam is formatted like an NIH proposal. So this is where some of that required coursework and proposal development comes in handy. So students are going to use what they've learned in that course to now develop independently an NIH style proposal where they are creating 2 to 3 aims based on their thesis work, but they're developing these aims and writing the proposal completely independent of their advisor. So this is a really nice opportunity for students to demonstrate their capacity for experimental design, interpretation, and really start to think critically about their thesis work. So again, this qualifying exam, it happens in the second year. It's expected to be completed by the end of that second academic year. And this is timed nicely where most students are also completing most of their coursework about this time. And so what that means is that once you complete your qualifying exam, really what you have to look out for from the end of year 2 onward is lots of research. Our program is structured so that students have support as they're progressing through their thesis research to make sure that they are on target and making progress. Part of this support comes from myself as the graduate coordinator. I review and look out for all of our graduate students annually, but students get more individualized, personalized attention from their research advisor and from their advisory committee. So students will form an advisory committee typically about the same time that they join a thesis lab. So certainly before the end of the first year, but often much earlier than that, perhaps by the end of the first semester. And your advisory committee is really tasked with monitoring your progression in the program, providing support and advice to help you select the courses that are most appropriate for you, ensure that you're making progress in your thesis research, suggesting career development activities outside of coursework, and setting up networking opportunities for you. So the advisory committee can be really critical to a student's progress. So for the experiential PhD student, their advisory committee would include their WPI thesis advisor, as well as a mentor or advisor from their place of work. In addition to those two key members, they would select 2 other members of the biology department who would serve on this committee and provide feedback and guidance. So the advisory committee is there from the beginning all the way through the end. This is the same committee that will evaluate the qualifying exam at the end of year 2, and also the same committee that will evaluate the thesis dissertation at the end of your PhD career. In addition, from years 2 on, students will be participating in annual research seminars. So they'll have opportunities to present their research and progress to the department, and they'll be strongly encouraged to present here at WPI in some of our graduate research symposia, as well as at local, national, and even international conferences. Key to doing research is disseminating or sharing that research. And in the Biology and Biotechnology department, the expectation is that your thesis research will lead to publishable data. And so in those years between 2 and the end of your thesis research, students will be supported and guided towards completing publishable bodies of work. And then at some point, all that research does come to an end, and students are tasked with preparing a dissertation. So our dissertation is both a written report of their thesis project, as well as a public presentation of their thesis research, and a private defense with their thesis committee, their thesis advisory committee, to kind of culminate the PhD experience. All right, so these are kind of the 5 key steps. They're pretty common to most PhD programs in biology and biotechnology, but I want to take a few minutes to really emphasize some of the things that our program does differently and how you might expect an experiential PhD to be navigated through these different steps. So the first is that you are going to work closely with your thesis advisor to plan your coursework. So unlike a student who is a full-time student here on campus who maybe isn't also working at the same time, you may not have as much flexibility in your schedule. And so your thesis advisor, and when you're identifying a thesis advisor, to some extent myself, would work with you to identify courses that are both of interest to you and fit in your schedule. I want to emphasize that because of the diversity of students that join our program, we do have a diversity of different types of courses, as well as different formats in which they're offered. So our course scheduling, typically our graduate courses are offered in the late afternoon or evening, and we have a number of courses that are offered online in asynchronous platforms. And so this is really amenable to those who might be working kind of a 9-to-5 job during the day. Many of our courses are offered in a traditional 14-week semester, but we also offer a number of summer semester courses, as well as kind of fast-paced 10-week courses in the spring or late spring semester. And this kind of flexibility in the way courses are offered can really allow a student to select courses so that they're completing their coursework at a pace that works best for them. So, maybe you have a really intense fall, but you have a little bit more flexibility in your work schedule in the spring or the summer. You can opt to take more courses at that time and fewer courses during the fall. As I mentioned on an earlier slide, students will form a thesis advisory committee. It's recommended you do that as soon as possible after selecting a thesis lab, and certainly before the end of the first year. And this really becomes important in making sure that you stay on track. You're going to present your thesis research to the department. Typically, students will meet with their thesis advisory committee shortly after that annual presentation. And this allows that meeting with your advisory committee to focus a little bit on research, but to focus more generally on you as a student and on how you're developing in the program. They're going to review the courses that you've taken, make suggestions for courses that you might want to take, perhaps something that complements the direction that your thesis research is going, or something that challenges you or expands your career development. They're also going to potentially suggest places to disseminate your research, so conferences you might attend, seminars you might present at, journals you might consider submitting your work to. And they will continue to give you guidance on career development activities. So there are required components of the program in that you have to take a certain number of classes, but you have a lot of flexibility in what classes you take and when you take them. You have to do thesis research. I've shown you that we have a diversity of labs here, lots of different types of research questions and different types of model systems that are being applied to answer those questions. But in addition to that, to get from a graduate student to where you want to go next with that PhD, often students want exposure and networking activities to kind of make that transition a little bit easier. And so as students develop and progress in the doctoral program, we leverage a number of different career development activities that happen here within the Biology and Biotechnology department, more broadly at WPI, that are offered and supported by our Office of Graduate Studies, and then things that are discipline specific, so workshops and networking events that might be within your own specific field of expertise. All right, so I just threw a lot of information at you. Really quick overview. The first year of our experiential PhD is really about finding your research home. You're going to identify a thesis lab. You're going to talk with the graduate coordinator, myself, and your thesis advisor to really formulate a course plan. So what are the courses that will prepare you for your thesis research, expand on that work, and prepare you for what comes next? And you're going to start taking a number of those courses. Many of our students complete 1/3 to 1/2 of their courses in that first year. Year 2, you're in your thesis lab, you're progressing in your thesis research, but a lot of focus is still on coursework and preparation for your qualifying exam. So that qualifying exam comes at the end of your second year, at which point students are now ready to really immerse themselves in their thesis research. Years 3 and 4 are primarily focused on research, perhaps an elective or two, if there's a special course that you've been waiting to take. And throughout this process, your progress is being evaluated. So evaluated by your thesis advisor, evaluated by your advisory committee, and evaluated by the department on a whole. So we review all of our graduate students to ensure that everybody's making progress, nobody slips through the cracks, courses that students need are being offered in a timely manner, and so forth. Once students progress to year 4, they're really kind of looking outwards, what comes after WPI, what comes after their PhD is completed. And this is really where our students will ramp up their career development and networking activities, which we're happy to support through the program and through WPI as a whole. These career development activities can include things like mentor teaching that happen outside of WPI. Certainly, most of our students attend conferences or meetings that are within their discipline or specialty. It can also include workshops, networking events, or perhaps additional electives if that's what a student decides is important for their development. And that's about all I have to tell you about our PhD program. I do want to really emphasize that what I've just told you, this is how students get a PhD in biology and biotechnology at WPI, regardless of whether they are an experiential student or an in-person full-time PhD student. So the opportunities and the training are equally robust, regardless of how the student is partaking in the program. But because of the flexibility in our elective courses, the structure of the courses, the timing of the courses, it's really able to be personalized to students who have responsibilities outside of the classroom. And for that reason, I think is particularly amenable to the experiential PhD approach.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Manning. And just to reemphasize, and this is actually a kind of a critical differentiator between WPI and how we do PhDs, especially for industry practitioners, and how other schools do it. So two critical differences. One, the quality and the rigor and the experience of doing an experiential PhD at WPI is identical to one that one would do on campus. There's no like watering down the experience. Oh, these rules, don't worry about it. You don't have to really meet these thresholds and such. You get the exact same experience, right? In terms of like, the requirements in order to complete the degree and the process of, developing that critical thinking skills and solving really challenging problems as though if you were full-time on campus, like your traditional PhD. And then the second one, this is also very critical. Um, you'll be doing a PhD degree with a faculty member, an actual faculty member that advises PhD students. It's not somebody saying, "Oh, hey, we got this person in industry who wants to do a PhD. Can you take care of that person?" Like, like, oh, these faculty are taking care of actual on-campus PhDs. No, it's like whether you are full-time working or full-time on campus, it's the same quality, same rigor, same expectations, and with the same engagement with an actual faculty member. I think that's really important, that because that's also like through everything we do, our undergraduate education, our graduate education, it's the quality's there. Like, that's the WPI brand, right? So I just wanted to emphasize that because there are several other schools out there that have these experiential PhD programs, but ours, and maybe it's not as scalable and it's a lot of work, but you get what you get from it what you put into it.
Yeah. And I certainly didn't emphasize that enough, but the identification of a thesis, a research home, it really does come from identifying a faculty member
Yep.
that shares similar expertise or similar research interests as you. And often that's someone who has interest or the potential to collaborate in the research you're already doing through your workforce. And I think that being able to leverage that and having both the academic advisor and the industry advisor through your work mentor um, can help streamline things and make it a little bit easier. It's not like, two completely distinct roles. You can kind of merge the two and really leverage, maybe resources at your place of work as well as the resources that are here at WPI.
So that's actually so me. I like before we ask, like, let's say some of the folks that are on the call, like, do you find that that is a game changer for a PhD? If let's say somebody's in industry and they have like let's say research infrastructure that might not be available at WPI, do you see that as something that can support a highly impactful PhD degree?
Are you looking for feedback from the students
Yeah,
or?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like that's the thing. Like because
Because
for
I
me,
have some thoughts on this.
sorry, there's just like, yeah, because I'm like wondering. I've said, is my internet freezing again? Like, but no, because seriously, because so let's say there's some great infrastructure here at WPI with respect to our research efforts, right? But obviously, industry has like a lot of companies have very niche and highly specialized infrastructure. Like, is that something where that could really be transformed into a win-win-win? Like, for instance, like that could create new opportunities that both the advising faculty member wouldn't have normally access to, now has access to, and is able to train the employee slash student in using, and also the type of publications that result from it, right? Like in terms of, let's say, scholarly works, like in your area, like is that something
Yeah,
that
you can
happens a
you can
lot, or?
absolutely. I can envision an experience where um, an experiential PhD student has access and training on techniques or equipment that are not available here, and now they can really leverage that to ask new questions, right? To apply that technology to a new system, a new question, and in that way, they're really poised to make some big and interesting advances.
Wow,
Right.
cool. And then the other thing is how the faculty in biology and biotechnology, some faculty tend to be like at least from my own academic discipline, tend to be highly theoretical and they're in that ivory tower. But how many faculty, like, how about the faculty in biology and biotechnology? Are they very, like, I say industry friendly, but do they get it in terms of like, hey, we understand how industry works, we know what the protocols are, what they're looking for, and they kind of like, they can really like work together rather than saying, oh, I'm going to be the academic and not collaborate with anybody. That, like, how do you find the faculty culture in BBT?
Yeah, so we have some faculty that have experience in industry before coming here.
Okay.
But we have a large number of faculty that have ongoing industry collaborations.
Okay.
So while many of us take a kind of a basic biology approach, so we're asking fundamental questions about how cells work, how cellular processes function, um, many of us are looking in systems that have direct applications to human health. So for example, I'm interested in understanding regulation of cell cycle, how cells ensure that their genome is intact. These have really important implications in diseases like cancer. So we've had collaborations with clinicians and pharmaceutical companies that are looking at or thinking about um, drugs to target different cancer contexts. And so
Wow.
similarly, we have faculty that are looking at different um, disease models. Um, and so there's the potential there for sure for translatable research. While the
Well,
faculty's focus may be kind of basic biology, fundamental biology, that translatable or clinical relationship is certainly there.
cool. Cool. So I'm gonna, let's ping some of the folks that are on the call, like Kevin and Jaideep. Like, any specific questions, anything that came out from Professor Manning's presentation, saying, "Wow, I would like to know more," or how can I use it? How can I use this knowledge in the context of what I'm trying to do? So any questions?
One question I got is like, how would we incorporate this research through the industry? Would like our PI be through WPI or would there be like another option through industry?
So in biology and biotechnology, experiential PhD students would have essentially two research advisors. You would have one WPI research advisor and then a mentor at your company. So it might be your direct manager, someone you're working closely with, who's supervising you, or it could be, if it were your company's preference for you to work on something independent from your day-to-day work, it could be someone in a different department or a different um, area of your industry.
Okay,
Uh,
and then a follow-up question to that was, um, so will the position of like the company that like supposedly working through our PhD matter? Like, or does it have to be like a research-based position? Like, for example, like could I be working QC or manufacturing and still continue working as a like take the PhD classes and all?
Yeah, so Alex, you can maybe answer some of this, but I can give you my take on it. It doesn't matter to biology and biotechnology what your work position is. What matters is that you have the freedom to do research and that one of the two campuses, either your workplace or WPI, has the resources, so the equipment, the intellectual guidance to help you progress in your thesis work. And so if you're in a position where you're not doing wet lab research and that's what you want to do, you may find yourself doing the research here at WPI. If you're in a research position and you have access to the equipment, you may find yourself getting guidance on the intellectual questions and the motivation for your research from both WPI and the industry partner, but perhaps you're doing your research at your place of work.
yeah. So just to add, usually what happens is if a company is all for supporting you for a PhD, they're preparing you for some sort of role in their organization. It's not through like, hey, we think this person here is awesome. Let's just like let them do a PhD. We'll cover it. It'll be great. Like they'll professionally grow. No, no. Companies think about what a company does, right? They try to sell products, right? And they're trying to innovate. They're trying to come up with new ways, of course, to make money. But really good companies also care about the professional development as well as grow talent within their organization, right? If they can't hire it, they'll try and grow. So if they see potential in an employee saying, wow, I think this person has a lot of potential. They've submitted 10 patents. They're a rising star in our organization. And you know what? Like one day we think there might even be like a leadership role for that individual. Um, let's see if we can support them with a PhD degree, right? And then what happens is, let's suppose at the same time there is a technology that there's no in-house expertise at that company, but WPI has a faculty member who is a world expert in that topic. Well, then that's a great opportunity. Let's bring that rising star employee and say, would you like to do a PhD? Now, not everybody's going to say yes, because there's a joke. PhD means permanent head damage, right? It is an experience. It's not for everybody. But if you're like saying, you know what, I think I really do want to increase my skill set at the doctorate level, and the company's like saying, we think that you have a lot of potential to grow, and perhaps you might want to explore this area, or it's an area you're already exploring, you're the only one in the company, and then that's the opportunity. Now, if you're like in manufacturing, right, there's no research, there's no R&D, or there's no applied research or anything like that. It's a little tricky. I've had people who've reached out where they say, I work in an environment that just like manufacture stuff, like I'm on a production line or something. That's kind of difficult. First of all, the company might say, hey, and you're going to do a PhD in what? Unless it's something like supply chain or something in business or maybe systems, that in which case it's a very different PhD. It might be a pharmaceutical company, but it might be something where it's more process, right? Or entrepreneurship or something, right? But nevertheless, so there's that. Um, so it really, and it takes a bunch of ingredients. So the size of a company. A startup may not have the financial resources to support somebody for a multi-year doctoral degree, right? Like like startup, but a very large company with enough of the resources to kind of support an activity like this will most definitely invest in its employees, right? And also timing. If you just started a company, people might say, well, we don't know how this person's going to perform. But if you've been at that company 2, 3, 4 years and you're doing outstanding work, and like your manager is willing to be your champion to support you, these are all very critical ingredients. And then very importantly, the flip side, there needs to be a WPI faculty advisor that with the same alignment who's willing to take you on and advise you, right? Because a PhD degree is not like a master's, it's not like an undergrad. It's not like I did my 4 years, I took a bunch of coursework, now give me a degree. Seriously, there are people who think that's what a PhD is. No, 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 no. It's like really it's a open-ended critical thinking challenge that you're ultimately trying to come up with a solution for. So does that answer, Jaideep? Like I think Professor Manning's like insights within BBT, and then just in general the mindset of what a company is thinking and how they want to support this is there's a lot of alignment that needs to happen.
Oh yeah, you guys answered my question really well, yeah. And then one, if I'm understanding this correctly, so throughout the PhD process, we'll be most likely doing like 2 projects then, like more than 2 projects.
That's more about, I have no clue. Like Amity, like how does that work? Like in terms of like the dissertation research, is it like segmented like that? How does that dynamic work?
I mean, in an ideal world, it would be a single project. Biology can be finicky, and sometimes you test a hypothesis and find out you were wrong, and there's no clear second way to or alternative hypothesis for that question. So you devise a new question and pursue that. But the goal is typically, there's a question or area of interest, and you define hypotheses, testable hypotheses. You do the wet lab experiments, to, challenge that hypothesis, find out if what you think might be true about the way a cellular process works is or not. And then you follow that up with more experiments, and those lead to more questions and so on. So typically, the trajectory is defined by the experiments or the results of the experiments that you do. But no, I don't think it would be the expectation at the start that you have 2 projects. Now, if you're working, and the industry that you're working for, would prefer that you not pursue academic questions related to your work research, then in that scenario, yes, you would have a job, you would have the research that you're doing for your job, and then maybe a related or distinct project that you're doing as your thesis research. But that really, it becomes a conversation with an individual industry, right? So for example, we do have a publication requirement. And so if part of your job is working on something that's super top secret that your company is resistant or unwilling to allow you to publish on, then your thesis project would have to be distinct from that, because there is an expectation for publishing and disseminating that research.
So in one critical thing based on a lot of things is like the I forgot which cartoon series, like work smarter, not harder. I think if there's the opportunity to overlap your everyday, your day job with your PhD degree in any possible way to reduce working 2 40-hour plus a week jobs, make it more like 60 hours a week total of working rather than 80 hours a week working per week. It's highly recommended. But like as Professor Manning mentioned, like IP, trade secrets, all that is a very tricky topic, right? A lot of workarounds. One of the big ones are if it's exploratory work that but not something critical path. It's not an actual product, but it's something that the company doesn't have much IP in yet. That's like saying, hey, we would. So like some companies, they would have what they call IRAD money, like internal R&D money, to do some internal development that is not a product yet, but it's kind of like an interesting hypothesis of like what would happen if we did this in this process rather than using our conventional, how much more efficient it is, how much more cost effective it is. It's things like that that lend itself, like, and that's also something where you can, pitch more readily within an organization saying, hey, I think this IRAD, because then your time at the company is also accountable, saying, I'm doing work on this IRAD, but it's also aligning with what I'm doing for my doctorate too. Like there are a lot of these, but again, that depends on the company. Some companies don't have internal R&D money. Some companies might also have sponsors too, right? And you have to be careful about like, but that's where very importantly, on the company side, you also need like a champion, either your most immediate direct report, perhaps, or maybe let's say if there's like a VP of research or a VP of engineering who believes in something like this, to kind of advocate for you and find kind of that best fit to make this work. Cool.
So, and then sorry, one more question. So in the case that like, for example, me, like I'm about to complete my master's, I was just wondering how the timeline, I guess, shifts. Because like based on the timeline, like in the last slide, it seems that like the first year, 2 years we'll be doing coursework. So would that be shifted as like the first year, the second year, like we wouldn't have coursework, I guess. Like we kind of just skip over that.
So unless you have completed for the 10 credits of required coursework, unless you have courses from your master's that are identical or nearly identical to those requirements, that coursework would still need to be completed as part of your PhD. But certainly if you have a master's degree in a related field, there may be opportunity to be exempt from some of the elective courses, for example. The total number of credits that you need to complete does decrease, which means the minimum amount of time to complete your degree is shorter. So the minimum amount of time with 60 credits, if you were to, for example, take a full course load, which most experiential PhDs would not, or full-time research, would take about 3.5 years. Now, for someone who's working full-time, I would expect that would not be a realistic timeline, that it would take a little bit longer, but certainly shorter than not having a master's degree.
One thing that came up is also, like, on the one hand, and you mentioned this, and I lived this too about 4 times in a row, like the failed starts of a PhD. It's like you try something for a few months, and then you try it again and sigh, and then and the 5th time, it miraculously something begins to kindle, right? In these projects, like with industry, right? If industry says, hey, we think something over here is very interesting and we're willing to put money behind it, and let's say develop a game plan that kind of takes the mystery and a lot of those potential failed starts out of the equation, does that help the timeline a bit, you think?
I think from the student's perspective, that certainly can, right? If you have support and resources so that you really are, essentially double counting your time, that's going to make for a shorter timeline. But you alluded to earlier, Alex, is, a key distinction between a master's degree and a PhD is that it's not just time spent, right? So at the end of your PhD thesis, you need to have generated data that's publishable.
Yep.
Negative data or failed experiments are typically not, sometimes, but typically not publishable. It depends why they failed, I guess, right?
Okay.
So if it's negative data because your hypothesis was wrong, typically that requires lots of experiments to confirm that it's not just the experiment
Okay.
failed, but the hypothesis is actually wrong. And so it is important for any thesis project, but particularly for a long-term project like a PhD, that you really put in the work in the beginning to make sure that you are defining a clear and testable hypothesis, that you have access to the resources, the reagents, the model organisms, whatever it be, that's going to allow you to test those hypotheses, right? It's not enough to have a good idea. You have to have a good idea that's testable. So we need the technology and the systems to be able to do that. But that's the job of the thesis advisor and the advisory committee is to provide that guidance to students so they're not going down a rabbit hole that's not going to give them data that will eventually be publishable. So that's why that guidance and kind of that walking along the path with our students is so important.
Cool. Kevin, how about you? Any questions?
Oh yeah, I have like pretty simple questions here. So what is the requirement for a student to apply this PhD program?
What's required of the student?
Sorry, the requirements.
Yeah, so for acceptance into the PhD program, we're looking for someone who has an undergraduate degree in biology or a related life science field, typically. On occasion, there are candidates who maybe have a degree, an undergraduate degree in a very different field, but that have extensive work experience that complements the research and the coursework that they would take here in the PhD program. So, either that work experience or the prior degree to demonstrate that they have the capacity for the research and the coursework that they'd be doing here at WPI. And then, for the experiential student, the additional consideration is you maybe don't have quite the same flexibility to pick any lab you want, right? You're going to want to pick a lab that complements the research that you're doing in your work position. And so identifying those potential labs up front, we would want to see from an experiential PhD candidate you know, they have the required background, but also that there's a good research fit for them here, right? So if somebody is doing, for example, you know, they want to do immunology, we don't really have an immunology lab here, and so that may not be the best fit for you. But if you want to do cancer biology or microbiology, you know, there's a number of labs here in our program that might be very good fits for that.
Any other questions, Kevin or Jaideep?
I'll just send a question. Who I going to contact? The person I'm going to contact, see, like, I want to apply for this PhD program. So who I going to contact?
So if it's like process of applying to the PhD program, Agatha Lajoie, who's on the call, is from WPI grad admissions. So she handles the logistics of the grad admissions process, and it goes through everything goes through an online portal, right?
Yes.
And the individual departments do the review of PhDs, if I'm correct. I think it's like master's programs. Some master's programs are handled directly in grad admissions, some are handled by department, but all PhD programs are handled by department, but they go through grad admissions. The process, as Professor Manning mentioned about finding the faculty advisor, now that's a different story, right? Like, you know, as Professor Manning mentioned, going online, doing your homework, finding out who's a good fit for what your interests are, where your directions are. Now that you need to kind of, you know, dig into, develop, and then find and inquire from these professors. Are they taking on students? Find out more about their backgrounds. If you can physically visit them, or do just maybe something easier like a Zoom call to find out more about what they do and see if there's a connection that you can both say, yeah, I agree. I think we should do a PhD out of it. And then I think that's the, and I'll find the link to the Biology and Biotechnology department. So I'll put in the chat.
Yeah, and that's really a critical first step for both experiential PhD candidates and those who maybe want to be in person full time, is really exploring our research web pages and just confirming that there are faculty who have shared research interests with you. And in the case of the experiential PhD, shared research interests with you, but also research interests that complement what you're doing in your day job.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. So I think we're out of time, but as I mentioned, like if anybody has any questions, you know, like, you know, please definitely feel free to reach out to any one of us. So let's see. There we go. So I'm going to put Professor Manning's email in the chat. So that's like, you know, so if you have any questions specifically about BBT, in terms of experiential PhD, as they say in French, c'est moi. And then with Agatha, about, like, you know, grad admissions questions, this is the following email address. So again, first of all, I really want to sincerely thank Professor Manning for her time this evening. You know, it's always a very long day, especially halfway through the week. And also the preparation to put together a really comprehensive slide deck. So first of all, thank you, Amity, for your time and, you know, this excellent presentation, as well as answering a lot of these great questions. So thank you. And you know, many thanks to Agatha, like, you know, for support from the grad admission side, because, you know, she definitely knows the number of inquiries we get. And I think our number one inquiry in terms of experiential PhDs is in the BBT area. And it goes without saying, because we are in this like biotech hub here in the US, right? And again, I want to also thank, like, you know, the you know, our attendees for, you know, spending some time with us, asking great questions. And again, if you have any other questions, to definitely feel free to reach out to any one of us if you have any questions about, like, you know, either grad admissions, about the biology and biotechnology department, about experiential PhD. So with that, thank you again, and looking forward to seeing you one day here on campus. So thank you again, and good night.